story begins at the Rubedo family estate, where a young lady dressed in black is shouting at someone, "Art! You're late, don't you think? Just how long does it take you to slay a dragon?" She yelled from her chair. A young man with black hair and extremely tired eyes tells her that he was sorry, Lady Wendy, while his body shivers. Wendy then pouts and tells Art that she wanted to eat the dragon, but her appetite was gone. "What's the matter, Wendy?" said a voice. It belonged to the Rubido's family patriarch Lates, who was asking Wendy what is it. Wendy then tells him to listen. She tells her father that Art had once again failed in his duties. Art continues to shiver and shake while kneeling. But Lates calls his name, causing him to flinch. He looks at Art with disgust in his face, calling him a useless imbecile, and that he had entrusted Art with the role of butler to his beloved daughter, but had completely failed to meet his expectations. Art was shocked to hear these words and began thinking that he was no good after all, and that his life had no meaning whatsoever, as he couldn't even live up to his master's expectations. Art sees that the two of them were still busy talking, but his vision begins to blur. As they called out to him, Art tells Wendy to leave it to him, but he soon collapses onto the ground. A flashback is seen from the past. Art was taken into the Robedo family as a baby. He was trained to serve as a family butler. Long ago he and Wendy got along well, but things eventually changed. Wendy had soon developed a strong temper. Additionally, she demanded more and more, from housework to slaying beasts. In the end, Art had developed magic to serve her. Day after day, Art had done so many tasks just to meet her demand. Eventually, Art stopped thinking and began to move autonomously. A cat is seen on Late's lap as he speaks out about the fact that Art had collapsed from exhaustion. He tells Art that they could easily replace him and that he should get out of his sight, as Art was now a useless crap. Art is then seen locked outside the family's gates. With his eyes still tired, he bows his head towards them. Art begins to walk through the snowy forest with his exhausted soul. He thinks about what he should do now. He doesn't see a rock and trips over it, falling flat on the ground. He begins to form tears in his eyes as he felt worthless after being fired. His bottle of water leaks out as he lays on the ground in the forest till nighttime. Snow began to fall from the heavens, which slowly covers Art as he continues to lay on the ground without moving. He thinks about the fact that he only wanted Wendy to smile. Just as a wolf approaches growling, a fierce-looking wolf slowly walks towards Art, its eyes focused on his body as he remained on the ground. It soon lunges towards him with its sharp fangs. But Art had manages to block the wolf's attack with his blade, sending it flying towards a tree. Art looks at it with lifeless eyes. He then begins to walk towards it. Slowly raising his sword into the air, he tells the wolf that he was sorry. But a small yap-yap sound is heard, catching his attention. It was revealed to have come from a bunch of baby wolves that were shivering and growling at Art. He sees that the parent wolf began to stood up, and he watched them slowly disappear from his sight into the snowy forest. Art then looks at his sword in his hand. He squeezes his sword arm, thinking how close he was in becoming a monster. He then spots the bodily dropped in size deeply at the loss of his water. He then decides to head west where he could join the guild to make some money. Art had decided to sleep within a tree to hide from the cold weather. Through his journey to the west, Art had various encounters ranging from being friends with a squirrel who helped him check if a mushroom was poisonous, facing off against a wild boar, and cooking the boar as a meal at night, and soon they finally parted ways with each other. Art had finally reached the city of Firen. As he walked through the crowds of the city, his dark aura surrounding his body caused others to be alerted to his presence. He soon reaches the guild of Firen, where there were various people inside. Art was looking at the mission board, wondering what was the most fitting job would be for someone who was raised as a butler. With his tired eyes, he spots many extermination requests. He then grabs onto a mission letter, which was a laundry request for the Isfield family, which was perfect. He quickly rushes to the counter and tells the lady that he would be the one to take the Isfield family laundry request. The lady was shocked to hear this, and so were the other members of the guild. They tell him that countless people had tried that quest already, and that Art was being an idiot for taking it, and that he should give it up, just as the lady at the counter was telling Art that the quest was not just any laundry request, but that nobody had succeeded in it till now. But something interrupts their talk as they both look behind. Art turns and sees a beautiful lady covered in blood, which made time feel like had stopped for the both of them. Art looks nervously at the lady covered in blood. The guild members talked amongst themselves, saying that it was Isfield the Ice Princess, and that she was both a novel and an adventurer. She sends a glare to the members, which forced them to turn and walk away from her, but Art was blushing as he stares at her. She then throws the sack onto the counter, saying that she had brought the quest items, which were several boars. The lady at the counter thanks her for the hard work. She then informs the Ice Princess that somebody had accepted her quest to do her family's chores. She wondered where the person who accepted the quest was as she looks around. The lady at the counter tells her that Art was behind her. Art and Urk both stared at one another in silence. Urk then breaks the silence by introducing herself as the eldest daughter of the Isfield family, Isfield Urk. She then asks Art who he was. She tells him to spit it out, which he nervously agreed to. He kneels onto the ground and bows his head, telling her that his name was Art, and that he will do his best to service his master with all his dedication. The introduction left Urk to be stunned upon hearing it. Art then realizes that they had spouted a line that he had used as a butler. But Urk looked at him with an intense glare. She then tells him that monster blood doesn't wash out easily, and that it takes an entire day to clean one piece of clothing. With all that info, did he still want to give it a try, she asks. Art then looks up at her, telling her that he still wanted to do it. Urk then asks how long would he need. He tells her that he just needs an hour, which shocks her. Urk looks at him curiously and then tells him to come with her. The Isfield family estate has a beautiful mansion and fountain are seen with flowers and butterflies everywhere. Urk and Art are seen walking through the estate. They soon reached a gate where Urk tells Art that she needed to go change and wanted him to follow Tet the butler to the back garden. Tet tells Urk that the results of her effort are extraordinary as usual. Tet and Art exchange greets as Tet tells him to follow him for the laundry. On their way there, Tet talks about how Urk became an adventurer to prove her worth according to family's traditions, and that the Isfield family was a noble house with the rank of Marquis. Art chuckles nervously upon hearing Urk's backstory. A scene is shown where Urk was bathing and soaping her body in the shower. They soon reached a bucket filled with a gross aura, which Art asked Tet if this was all the laundry. Tet explains to him that the blood of monsters permanently ruins clothes after 3 days, and that cleaning just one of them would be a labor that takes 3 people an entire day. But Art replies that it was no problem. Urk had arrived wearing a beautiful dress that catches Art's attention. Urk asks him if there was blood on her face, but Art replies nervously that there was none. She then giggles and tells him that it was a strange one and good luck with the laundry. Art sees this and blushes while thinking that she was totally different from Wendy. He then removes the cloak he was wearing. He bows his head and tells them to leave it to him. Art begins by grabbing a pail of water and tosses it onto the pile of laundry. The staff were amazed by Art's technique as it was perfect, but wondering if he needed help, but he declines. Urk sees him and notices that he had a skill as Art closes his eyes. He then rotates the laundry covered in water. Urk then realizes that he was using magic. She stares in amazement as she had never seen this kind of magic before. Art smiles as his magic was being casted. He had created this type of magic to do all his chores, making it his very own original domestic magic. Called bubbles, as multiple bubbles started to float into the air and around the estate. Urk sees the bubbles in the air and smiles, calling it beautiful. The laundry was now hung onto the line to dry. The staff gathered around it and commented about how it looked brand new and was spotless. Tet then turns around to ask Art how he did it. Art then explains that he had followed the concept of slimes that could absorb and digest anything they touched, and based on that principle, he had made a digestion spell to replace the digestive fluids with detergent to clean things. The staff was impressed that Art had made use of a monster's behavior and that it was brilliant. Urk then calls out to Art. She apologizes to Art for doubting him, which shocks both Tet and Art. She then tells Art that he was amazing for solving a problem so easily, as everyone was working hard to the bone over her laundry. But Art was stunned to hear that as he considered it as easy. Urk then tells him that she wanted to ask him something. She asks him if it would be alright to call on him again, which caused Art to recall Wendy's strict commands. He immediately kneels down in front of Urk and tells her that he was hers to command. Fear and sweat trickle down Art's face as his body trembles while Urk looks at him. She then walks over to him and touches his face, telling him that she didn't know what kind of life he had lived, but that this wasn't an order. She offers her hand to him, telling him that it was a request instead. Art's face shined brightly as he thought of the word request having a nice ring to it. He recalls his past memories of when he was given orders constantly and that he didn't have a choice. As the staff gathered around Art, he realized that a request was different. He smiles knowing that he had the right to decide for himself. He smiles happily and tells Urk that if it's a request, just leave it to him, as it was for now that Art had begun to live life. Art soon wakes up from the daylight of the morning into the sound of birds chirping. Urk sat beside him and tells him good morning. Art was stunned to see Urk after waking up. He screams in shock and looks around wondering where he was. He thinks deeply about why he was in bed, but could not remember a single thing. He looks around the room once more and sees Urk thinking that he did something he shouldn't have. Art then covers himself with a pillow to hide his embarrassment from Urk as he was in her room. But she asks him what was wrong and if he couldn't remember. As Art was hiding and blushing, Urk explained to him that after doing the laundry yesterday, he had collapsed from doing all the laundry at once. Art hits himself with the pillow thinking about how he had pushed himself too far using magic. Urk leans close to Art asking how he was feeling now. Art lifts the pillow up and tells her that he was much better due to her generosity. But Urk had to make sure and touches his forehead, telling him not to lie as he still looked pale. This action caused Art to be knocked out as she tells him that Tet had prepared his reward. Tet brings in a huge chest filled with endless gold. Art was surprised to see the large amount of gold. Urk tells him that the Isfil family could afford this and asked if he had any plans elsewhere. He tells her that he didn't. Urk then snaps her finger calling for Tet. After a while, Art was seen wearing a brand new set of clothes. He asks Urk if it was okay for him to wear these as they were very nice. Urk tells him that it was clothing prepared for servants and that she plans to keep Art in her employ. She then tells Art that the clothes look good on him. Hearing this made Art blush as he bows his head to thank her for allowing him to serve her. But Urk smacks Art, causing him to scream in pain. She looks him straight in the face and tells him to cut the formalities as they were the same age. Art smiles happily upon hearing those words from her. The three of them are then seen walking through the corridors to head to breakfast. On their way there, Art whispers to Tet about why Urk was acting so nice. Tet then explains to Art that Urk was the head of the family and was known as the Ice Princess, and if he had heard the rumors from the guild. He then continues to say that there were many nobles who hated commoners, which caused Art to recall Wendy's face, and that Urk absolutely hated those kinds of nobles, which also meant that Urk couldn't stand being in the presence of such individuals. Urk was the only noble he knew that shared the same perspective as commoners, making her a truly kind person. Art smiles happily hearing about Urk being a nice person as he knew that she had a lovely heart as well. They soon entered the dining room where the house head Ramon Isfil asked Art if he was the new guest. Art introduces himself to Ramon, but he tells him that he already knew the story and shouldn't act so stiff. Urk then calls out to Ramon about the dark circles underneath his eyes and that they were getting worse. She recommended that they go to a doctor. But Ramon declines the offer, saying he doesn't want to consult a doctor for this because he was just not sleeping properly in the beds of the house. But Urk was concerned as it has been going on for some time now and was afraid of what will happen if it continues. Ramon tells her that it would just be fate's will. Urk shouts at him for saying this, but Ramon tells her that he missed the imperial beds. He puts his head onto the table while talking about how the imperial beds were the best as it felt like you were sleeping clouds. Art then tells him that he could make one. Hearing this stuns everyone in the room, but Art continues to tell them that the material would be different from the imperial version, but it was still possible. Art looks around at everyone's faces and wonders if he had said something wrong. Tet then tells Art that he was wrong as making one of those beds takes a craftsman with decades of experience to do, and that it would take him at least a year to make it. Art then tells them about how his previous lord forced him to make it from a glance, causing everyone to think of Art being a poor thing. Ramon then offers to pay 10,000 gold for one bed, which shocks Art. He then tells Art that it will be quite a sight to see him build one, and if he had the talent, he would be rewarded generously. Urk then requests Art if he could build one for her father. Art thinks about how long it had been since anyone had depended on him like this. He agrees to their requests and tell them that he would be grabbing some great blackbird feathers. Urk then tells him that she will come along as it was far too dangerous. In the Dorado Forest area, Urk and Art are seen on a tree. Urk asks him if the feathers of the blackbird were extremely hard and dirty, making it hard to be like the imperial beds. She then recalls that the feathers of a great blackbird would make for some of the best adventurers' armor out there. Art then tells her to relax, as he wanted to show the people that needed him how well he could handle it. Urk agrees reluctantly and mentioned that the blackbird was a B-rank medium-sized monster which would be difficult to defeat. She then tells him that when it comes she will be the one to hunt it down. But Art tells her that he would do it. He then thinks about how the moment was strange as the blackbird should be roaming around here at this time of the day. A fierce roar was heard in the forest, catching Art's attention. Above us, Art shouts as a huge blackbird appears from the sky. It crashes into the tree where they were causing a huge explosion. Urk tells Art to get down as she will be the one to hunt it down as they face off against the great blackbird. She then rushes towards the blackbird, shocking Art. She swings her massive sword towards the blackbird, but it deflects her attack with its black feathers. A chemical was then seen sizzling in the blackbird's mouth, which Art notices as an acid attack that he couldn't allow Urk to be hit by. He then casts his magic enhancement paralysis on his dagger and throws it towards the blackbird. It lands into the blackbird's throat, making it paralyzed. Seeing that the blackbird was paralyzed, Art exhales deeply and took a focused sword stance and soon unsheathes his blade from its cover. With a simple dash and slash, Art slices the head off the blackbird. Urk was stunned to see this as the blackbird's head falls to the ground. She calls out to Art, who asks her if she was okay, but Urk asked him what that sword technique was as she couldn't even see the sword hit it. Art says it was no big deal as he just casted his paralysis magic enhancement. Urk was shocked to hear that he could use such magic. She explains to him that there were only a handful of people that could do something like that. But Art tells her that they needed to skin the bird for the feathers. Urk then shows a hesitant face which caused Art to ask her what was wrong. She tells him that it was nothing and took in a big gulp before stabbing the bird with her knife. Blood exploded all over as Art stood in the back shocked at what he was seeing. He then asks her if this was the reason why she was always covered in blood, to which Urk replies that he shouldn't tell anyone about this. Urk was then seen in the showering washing herself with bubbles and soap all over her body. She then looks at the bucket filled with feathers and asked Art if they could really use these hard black filthy feathers for a bed. Art tells her to leave it to him and soon casted his original magic. Bubbles and feathers soon floated into the air due to Art's magic as everyone stares in amazement. They hold onto the newly washed white feathers as Art explains to them that the blackbird's feathers were white and soft, but after years of dirt they turned black and hard. Urk praises Art for his incredible knowledge. He then tells them that his previous employer wanted blackbird for dinner, making him study them a lot. They began to say it was fate and a coincidence that Art showed up like this. Hearing those words make Art blush and he tells them that he could make more. After a while the newly made bed was placed inside Ramon's room. He then leaps onto the bed and bounces. He tears and laughs as he sleeps on the bed. Urk and Tet couldn't believe that they were seeing him laugh that way. Ramon then yells at them to get out of his room to allow him to sleep. After some time, they peek into the room and could see him sleeping soundly. All the staff rush to Art asking if he could make one for them as well. Art agrees and smiles at the thought of making everyone happy like this. He then agrees to make a bed for everyone, causing all of them to celebrate with joy. Tet then asks Art about what he was going to do next and that with his powers, some nobles would want to abuse it. Art thought deeply about his past with Wendy and tells Tet with a smile on his face that he just wants to see everyone's happy faces. Urk smiles at his answer and tells him that she will be the one to protect his smile. Art blushes at the sight of Urk smiling at him. Tet sees the both of them laughing and smiling. As time passes by, Art then tells them that he will be heading back to his room first. But Urk grabs onto his wrist telling him to wait and asks if he could come to her terrace tonight. Urk is seen standing on the terrace as night falls. Art arrives and sees her face being lighted by the moonlight. He stares at her, dazzled by her beauty as she turns to him and says, "You're here, Art," as the moon shined in the starry night. Art mentions to her that Ramon was now sleeping soundly, to which URL replies that it was thanks to him. He was glad to hear it, and soon a silence fell upon them as Art looks at Urk nervously while blushing. They soon caught each other trying to speak at the same time. Urk then decides to go first. She asks Art about where he had exactly come from, which causes Art to think about how he never mentioned it before. Art looks hesitant at answering her question, but Urk assures him that regardless of his answer, she will always be on his side. Art smiles and tells her thank you. He then went on to explain to Urk about his past with the Rabedo family and serving Wendy as her butler. With a sad look in his eyes, he tells her about how he worked frantically to repay his debt to them, but in the end he had failed to meet their expectations, and that it was all his fault. Urk could only stare at him in silence after hearing him speak. Art then calls out to her, to which Urk asks him if that was really what he thinks. She opens her arms and tells Art that she wanted him exactly the way he was. But Art thinks deeply, knowing that he would be fine with Urk, but was still hesitating. Urk then tells him about how she hated being called the Ice Princess. As memories from 10 years ago was shown, Urk explained that her family was always prestigious amongst the nobility, even for Marquis, and that she had never given much thought to her family's position. She just wanted to be friends with everyone, or so she thought, until one day she spotted the girl she was playing with. The man tells the little girl if she was getting along well with the Marquis daughter, to which the little girl replies that Urk had given her a flower. The man says excellent work as Urk listens onto their conversation. The man continues to tell the little girl that URL was a wonderful tool to use in order to get closer to the royal family, and that the little girl should stay close to her. Tears begin to form in Urk's eyes as she listened to the man talk about how their family was only a viscount, which was lower nobility, and that they needed to do this to rise in society. Back to the present, Urk talks about how nobility of higher ranks hold incredible power. As she grips her hand tightly, she tells Art that she felt cursed by her position. She then turns to Art asking him if he hated nobility. Urk looks at him waiting for his reply, but Art tells her that he doesn't, which surprises her. He explains to her that being thrown out was incredibly painful, but upon seeing Urk and Ramon he realized that there were kind nobles as well. Hearing those words made Urk recall Art saying he just wanted to see everyone's happy faces. "That's very like you," said Urk. She then tells him that they should head inside as it was getting cold outside. Art agrees straight away. But Urk was angry at the fact that the Rabedo family had taken full advantage of Art's kindness and made sure to remember Rabedo Wendy's name. The next day, wearing her armor, Urk tells Art that she will be going over to the guild today. Art tells her that he will follow, but Urk stretches his face, telling him that he needed to rest as he had worked a lot already. As they waves goodbye to another, Art overhears somebody calling the head maid outside the window. He sees that the maids were having trouble with handling the bugs which were going to eat the vegetables. He calls out to them saying that he had an idea. Soon after, the maids were amazed to see that the bugs were running away from the vegetables. Art then explains to them that he had used laundry and bestowal magic to attach Ramon's scent, a combination which drives the bugs away. A voice appears saying how impressive it was for Art to create this using bestowal magic. The voice belonged to a handsome young man who winks at the maids as they called out his name, Lord Fry. The head maid tells Fry that he should have let them know in advance that he was coming back so they could prepare his meals, while the other maids were swooning over and falling in love with Fry. Fry apologies to the maids as they left, talking about how cool he was. He soon turns his attention to Art and introduces himself as Isfil Fry, Urk's brother. Art then introduces himself to Fry, but Fry taps onto his shoulder rapidly, telling him he hated stiff formalities, but what was more important was how cute Urk is. Fry is a siscon, ladies and gentlemen. Fry soon asks for a handshake from Art. Art hesitates but still offers his hand. As Fry grips Art's hand, he notices something. He smiles and tells Art to duel with him, which causes Art to be confused, but he soon realizes that Fray's hand was cold. Fry looks at Art in a serious manner. "Aren't you really strong?" Fry asks as he holds Art's hand. Art and Fry are seen alone together. Art asks Fry if he really wanted to fight, to which Fry replies, "Of course, all the traveling is making me rusty." Art then asks to fight. Fry then snaps his fingers at Art, telling him that he wanted to gain only Ichan points while winking. Art then agrees to the fight if it means making Fry stronger. Fry instantly disappears and reappears behind Art, telling him, "Here I come." He then unleashes a powerful uppercut of his sword attack to Art, which Art manages to deflect. Fray's powerful attack could be seen from the skies. "Amazing! You survived my attack. I knew it. You really are strong," said Fry as he smiles. Art, on the other hand, was checking the spot Fry hit him on, noting what a terrifying slash, and that it was a one move that was equivalent to getting hit by a cannonball. Art then focuses his stance, thinking that he needed to start getting serious. Fry sees this and realizes that Art was becoming serious. Fry then takes a step back and instantly leaps towards Art, telling him he was going to speed up. A mad flurry of attacks came from Fry towards Art, but Art manages to deflect and attack according to Fray's attacks. Their attacks seemed to miss each other and made it look like they were on equal footing. But a sweat drop appears on Fray's face as he realized that Art was stronger than he thought, and that not even a single attack landed on him. Fry then unleashes another terrifying blow, saying he won't lose. "For my honor as the heir of the Isfil family." As they continue to exchange blows with one another, Fry thinks about how if they show any form of weaknesses, the other families could exert political pressure against them, and hence, as the first son of the Isfil family, he needed to be stronger than anyone else, in order to protect both his family and people, and in order to protect Urk. Just as Fry was thinking about going all out, he wondered where Art's limits were, but Art calls out to him. He tells Fry not to hold back and to wear him down. Fry hears this and decides that he won't hold back, summoning a huge ice flower in the skies above the two of them. Ramon was in the mansion when a loud noise throws him off guard. He looks out the window and sees the huge ice flower in the fields where Fry and Art were. Ramon wonders if it was Fray's doing and that he had came back unannounced. Fry explains to Art, who had been crushed by the frozen flower, that he could use bestowal magic with refrigeration to create ice. Ramon thinks about Fray's magic, about how that ice and its temperature in the air was lowered to condense the water vapor into ice, which was then formed into a weapon. But cracks soon started to appear in the flower frozen. Art had broken out of it without a single injury. Fry and Ramon were surprised to see that he had smashed the ice magic flower. Fry remarks about how amazing Art was and asked how he did it. Art then tells him that it was nothing special, as he just used his bestowal magic called friction to heat his sword and melt the ice. Ramon analyzes Art's words and noted that since magical ice is strong enough to shatter steel, however magical heat counters it. Ramon remarks how very clever. Fry looks at Art in amazement and noted that he sees why Urk took an interest in him. But Art replies nervously at the comment and mentioned that he and Urk had only met recently and thinks only about being useful to Urk. Both of them soon regained their serious game faces and lunge at one another at great speed. As their blades collide, Fry thinks about being an ultra-cool big brother, while Art thinks about paying back his debt. They stare at one another seriously once again, and begin their flurry of attacks against each other once more. Fry shouts out that this is interesting, very interesting. Art tells Fry that he was quite strong as he had never seen these techniques before. Fry smiles and thinks that Art was still holding back. He then tells Art that he was only at 70% of his power capacity as the sky starts to darken. A huge godly wolf with white eyes soon appear behind Fry as he tells Art that he will get serious. A calm and serious look was in Fray's eyes as mist appears all around them. He takes a serious fighting stance, recalling that in the distant past during the war between the gods and titans, a titan was known as the Great Wolf, amassed fathomless power in a bid to destroy the gods with its prey in its sights. With one decisive blow, its jaws rent the earth asunder and devastated the world. Fry then rushes towards Art with his god wolf as its attack was called Fenrir. Art sees this and begins to stand in his sword stance. It is said that a master is someone who becomes one with their technique, with a single technique in their whole being. They give their all to courageously strive forward, to transcend the limits of human reason. With a single swing of his blade, Art cuts through everything from Fray's Fenrir attack to even splitting the heavens into two. Art's sword breaks as he points the broken blade into Fray's face. Art was disappointed that his sword had broken and needed to still improve. Art recalls that the technique he used was a technique of the primordial creation which he discovered in the royal capital's archives and had diligently worked on improving it. Frey's face was filled with shocked, but his son chuckles then laughs while slapping his face. He tells Art that he had one and that he was really strong. But Art refutes his statements and told Frey that if he didn't use magic he would have lost. Frey calls Art a good guy and thought about how Art had targeted the blade of his sword in order not to hurt him. Tet then arrives onto the scene and calls out to the both of them. He greets Frey about how long it had been and wondered if they were training swords again, as expected of a royal knight. Tet added. Art was shocked to hear the words royal knight. Frey then formally introduces himself to Art. He was the first chair of the Royal Knights Magic Academy, and the vice captain of the Royal Knights Isfiel Frey. He then winks at Art telling him that he was basically the captain already and that he should keep it a secret, as only the king and Isfiel family knew about it. Disgusting. Set of voice as a hand smacks a teacup away. We are now back in the horrible Rube house where a servant is apologizing to Wendy. She bites her nail thinking about where Art was and why her father had thrown him out. Her father then appears from behind the door wondering what the matter was. Wendy points at the servant and tells her father Lates to fire him, but Lates tells her that she would have fired the 10th servant so far and wondered if they were all that terrible. But Wendy screams at him telling Lates that they were all awful and how she hated this while wishing that Art was still here. Lates then informs her that there will be no end to the substitutes if they were meant to replace Art, but more importantly he informs her that the royal ball was in 3 days. Hearing this made Wendy happy to know that the royal ball was still taking place. Lates confirms it and thinks about how Wendy should be considering marriage as well as she dances around the room happily. She then opens the wardrobe which reveals a dark dress. She hugs it as it was a wonderful dress that Art had made for her, leaving the rest up to him. Urk is seen sipping tea in a beautiful garden. Just as Frey enters and shouts out loud, saying Urk, my dear beautiful sister. I'm home. But Urk looks at him in disgust. Frey continues to be happy and tears flow from his face as he shouts out Urk, aiming for a hug from her. But she ignores him and greets Art instead, causing Frey to slam into the ground. With blood dripping from his nose, Frey continues to call out to Urk saying her brother was here. But Urk continues to ignore him as Art thinks of their relationship as an odd one. Art then asks Urk about her request for today, which she informs him that she had gathered medicinal herbs for an orphanage. Frey was screaming in joy over hearing his sister's voice in the background. Hearing that she helped an orphanage, Art couldn't help but feel worthless. Urk then reminds him that he had helped them with the laundry and beds. Frey was shocked to hear this. Urk then tells Art that they should take it slowly together, putting one foot in front of the other. Hearing this angers Frey as he tells Art that they should duel again as he had just heard something that he can't condone as a brother. Hearing the word again catches Urk's attention as she stares with an intense glare. She yells at Frey asking if he was bullying Art, but Frey nervously tells her to stop it as he didn't do it, but an angry aura still arose from Urk as Frey tried to deny her claims. Big brother, I hate you, yelled Urk, which broke Frey. He collapses onto the ground saying it was all over and that his world had come to an end. Ramon then enters asking what the ruckus was all about. Frey calls him daddy and tells him that Urk said she hated him. Ramon then tells him to say sorry, to which Frey didn't want to do. Ramon then asks why he was home as there must be a reason for it. Frey then tells him that he had a message to deliver, and with a serious look he informs him that it was about that event. Art was curious about what event it was, but Ramon deflects the topic and asks what their plans were for the royal ball. Urk looked unhappy as she tells him that she didn't want to go, but Ramon reminded her that the Duke had requested for her audience. Art thinks about how the royal ball was a gathering where all of nobility get to strengthen their ties. Frey and Tet then declined the invitation to attend the ball as they were busy, which shocks Ramon as he was the one asking. The three of them then started thinking about who could attend in their stead. They needed someone who was reliable, had proper etiquette, and someone whom Urk could rely on. They all gaze at Art, causing him to fluster. Urk looks at him and decides that if Art was going she would go. Hearing this made Art blush. Tet then agrees with the decision as Art would be the perfect candidate to be a bodyguard to Urk and a representative for Frey. He then asks Art if he could represent the Isfiel family. Art took a moment to think and wondered if he could be useful to Urk. He then bows his head and agrees to take on the duty, making Urk happy as she tells him that she appreciates it. Urk then returns to the mansion as she needed a dress to be made. The head maid appears and informs Urk that she had grown again as she measures Urk's body. She blushes upon hearing those words and tells her not to say it. The head maid then informs her that since Art had arrived her chest has gotten even bigger. She then advises her that when a woman becomes aware of a man, their body will imitate certain developments. Essentially the woman wishes for the man to view her as a woman. Hearing this causes Urk to blush heavily as she wondered who she wanted to view her as a woman. But soon Art's face appeared in her mind. She was shocked and wondered why she had imagined his face. The head maid giggles and mentioned that they needed to have her bust enlarged. She whispers to Urk and asked if they needed Art's assistance, but Urk brushes her off, calling her a fool and that it was not needed, but the head maid teases her saying that they just needed him to adjust her size. The two of them continue to argue about Art. Ramon is then seen asking about that event. Frey informs him about the eclipse locusts that he had brought up at an inappropriate time. Roman noted that it was taking place this year too, and that every few years, they would make an appearance in millions, destroying land and villages they sweep across the country. Frey tells him that the locusts had already struck Paul. Ramon notes that he was already informed, to which Frey expected as he was more updated than the Lord Chancellor. Roman replies that the Lord of Paul was a friend and asks what he thought of Art. Frey responds that he thinks of Art as a good and honest kid who was a genius that was born only once every 1,000 years. But Ramon felt bad about Art's past history, which was incredibly harsh. Frey was glad they found him as the bed he made was dangerously comfortable. Roman then tells Frey to leave the locusts to him and wanted Tet's report on the house of Rubedo. Tet reported to them that the former staff had told him about a dark rumor, which tells them that the Rubedo family had access to large sums of money from unauthorized sources, which were perhaps illegal businesses or other risky ventures. Roman hears this and thinks deeply, hoping that nothing happens. Night arrives and a carriage is seen in the forest. Art and Urk were sitting inside of the carriage. Urk had a sad expression on her face as she looks out the window. She then calls out Art's name. She touches the window and tells him that nobles are troublesome people. Hearing this made Art sad as he looks at her. He then calls out to Urk, who asks him what is it. He tells her that she looked beautiful. But URL tells him not to flatter her as the dress didn't fit, but Art tells her that she looks like a goddess. He then takes her hand and kneels before her, telling her that he swears to protect her no matter what may come. Urk and Art stare at each other as Art had decided for himself that he won't be anyone's puppet, and that he was sure it would be fine for now, just as the carriage heads to a castle in the horizon. Urk and Art soon arrive in front of a giant door of a mansion with guards stationed outside. Art looks at Urk, who showed an uncomfortable expression on her face. He stares at her deeply before bringing out a perfume bottle, to which he casts cleanse and enchant perfume on her. He asks her if that had helped calm her down, to which Urk just stares at him. He then bows in front of her asking if she would be so kind as to allow him to escort her. She gives a faint smile and says gladly. They soon enter the mansion with their arms intertwined with one another. The other nobles see Urk walking through and commented that she was as beautiful as an angel, and that Art wasn't too shabby himself. Urk felt embarrassed and thought of somebody who didn't come, but Art tells her not to worry, and informed her that he was here after all. Urk blushes as she hears those words from Art. The musicians in the hall began to play music. Urk and Art soon started to look around and noticed that the people around them were dancing. Art then calls out to Urk, offering his hand and asked if he could have the pleasure of dancing with her. The both of them smile at one another before Urk agrees and holds his hand. They held each other close as they danced to the tune of the music. The more they danced together, the more embarrassed and shy they felt towards one another, which they noticed, but they soon laugh it off together and continue to happily dance to the music. Just as they were dancing, a lady notices them from afar. A lady rushes into Art's body and hugs him, interrupting the dance between him and Urk. Art was surprised by this sudden action. He recognizes her as Her Highness Leah, who tells him that they finally got to meet. Urk was stunned to see this as Art asks her to release him from her hug. Leah calls Art a wonderful person, which confuses both Art and Urk. She then recites the fact that Art was the one to save her Leah Drab from a dragon's wrath and was her knight in shining armor. She then tells him that she couldn't hold in her eagerness to meet him. Urk then interjects into the conversation. She asks Art why he'd never tell her about this, but Art apologizes as he thought it wasn't important. Leah then recommends they go somewhere quieter first. Wendy had soon arrived in the hall wearing the black dress that Art made and was carrying a black fan with her father behind her. She walks through the hall as the people around her wonder why it was nosier than usual, and that it was because the princess had made an appearance. But Wendy was focused on what they were thinking about the dress that Art made, and if they couldn't take their eyes off her now. She then talks to her father wondering about which of the nobles had he picked to be her fiancé. Lates then points to a certain individual that was her future husband, but shock was written in her eyes as she sees where he pointed. Lates tells her that her finance was young Mr. Freyman Daigle, who was a large man stuffing his face full of food at a table, with shattered plates around and pieces of food on the ground. Wendy was taken back by the sight of this. She quickly turns to her father asking if he was kidding and that there was no way she could be with such an unsightly pig. But Lates immediately slaps her right in her bitchy face. Lates nervously laughs out loud in apologies to Freyman for the noise, and stated that Wendy was talking about the food. Wendy was in shock as she held the spot where her father had slapped her. She knew about how it was the first time he had hit her just as Lates recommended they meet Freyman in the kitchen. Freyman's face was revealed up close with sauces on his face. He calls out to Wendy as his fiancée and tells her to come here. Wendy tears up upon seeing this horrible scene, as her black fan remains on the ground. Back to our favorite group, Urk asks Leah and Art how they were acquainted. Art explains to her that he had some business in the royal capital while Leah commented that he looked so cool when he defeated the dragon. Urk was a bit disappointed to hear this as it made her think that Art was nice to everyone. Leah then asks him if the thing she had sent was useful in his happenings. But Art was confused and asked what the thing she was talking about was. Leah then explained that she had sent a large number of gold bars from the royal treasury that she had permitted him to have, but Art continued to give a blurred look which Leah notices. She then asks if he didn't receive it, to which Art replies that he was sorry as he does not remember such a thing. Leah then changes the topic as she could send something else later and asked why Urk and Art had come to the party together. As they explain their reasoning to her, Leah realizes that she had been found out. She thinks about how love is blind, but Art doesn't even realize, just as he calls out to her. She grabs onto his arm asking him if he was free after this and if he would like to visit her place, but Urk joins in by grabbing his other arm telling her that Art couldn't go as he was her butler. The two of them argue as others watch while Leah tells Urk that Art would be happier by her side, but Urk refuses saying that Art should decide. As they argue, a black dress is seen dashing by. Wendy was running away thinking that she refuses to be with a pig-like man and that she would rather die than marry him. But she soon trips on the carpet and falls flat on the ground. She begins to tear up thinking if only Art was here. As she lay on the ground with tears in her eyes, she overhears Urk and Leah arguing with one another. She then spots Art's flustered face between the two girls. Her face was filled with shock and then anger as she calls out Art's name, which he hears. "There you are," she yelled as she walked towards them. Urk, Leah, and Art were all stunned to see Wendy in front of them. A memory flashback is shown 8 years ago where there are signs on the gate with the words "Dunce, idiot, dumb girl, incompetent family." A young Wendy is seen upset while young Art watches over her. She asks Art if he could go and punish the meanies. But Art tells her that they shouldn't as she would regret trying to go against. As young Miss was a nice person, he said with a smile. But hearing those words made Wendy angry as she wondered why he didn't save her. She thinks about how she was the only one who was suffering, which was unacceptable to her. Wendy asks Art with a smug look on her face where he was this entire time and if he had quit being her butler. But fear and shock made it hard for Art to reply to her. Seeing this angers Wendy as she turns and tells Art to leave with her. But Urk tells her to wait. She asks if she was Wendy Robetto. But Wendy asked Urk who she was. Urk didn't reveal who she was but instead told her that the rumors of her evil treatment were true. Wendy wonders who this high-handed woman was and sees her sliver hair, which belongs to the Isfil family. Wendy recognizes her as the Ice Lady. She then bows her head to apologies for her discourtesy and wonders why Art was with the Isfil family. Urk tells her to stand down and that she would overlook her impudence this time, but she needed to separate herself from Art. But Wendy tells her with a glare that it was up to Art to decide. The two of them soon enter into a staring contest. Art didn't think that this would happen when he decided to come here. But Wendy gives him the bombastic side eye telling him that her orders are absolute. Art's mind suddenly went blank upon hearing those words and sweat began to drip more down his face. He soon realized that his words won't come out of his mouth. But Urk's voice snaps him out of his confusion. She asks him if he was feeling alright and that he shouldn't push himself. But Art tells her that it was nothing. Urk felt concerned as she heard him. Art thinks deeply about how if he went against Wendy it will rouse her temper, making trouble for Urk and her royal highness. Urk then yells out to Ark wondering what was wrong. But Leah then asks Urk if she knew the story of Hyoko. Urk wonders why she was so calm. But Leah continues with her story, stating that after hatching the Hyoko bird deems the first individual that they see as their parent figure, they've etched in the bird's memory for its entire lifespan, and it seems that ever since Art was born, he has been serving the Robetto family, making Wendy's orders absolute. They could see that Art right now was being dominated by his fear of her, and that his brain was trying to rewrite his memories, while retaining his sense of self as he tries to return to who he was in the past. Hearing this upsets Urk. She bites hard wondering why someone like Art who could do almost anything and who was willing to do anything for others. Why was he willing to listen to orders from a horrible woman like Wendy? Urk's hand trembles in anger as she thinks that he was willing to be with someone who tramples over others' goodwill and for someone that will use him until he was knocking on death's door. Urk was upset as she asks Art why he had lied to him. Leah covers her face with her fan after hearing Urk. She then walks over to Wendy to ask her a question. With a deadly look in her eyes, she asks Wendy where the gift of a mountain of gold she had left to Art was. Wendy was shocked at first, but then tells her that she didn't know what she was talking about. But Leah warns her not to feign ignorance as she heard it all from Art before. Wendy then pushes the blame onto her father saying that it was something he was in control of, but Wendy was firm as she tells Leah that all of Art's belongings were hers as well. Leah replies that it seems that Art himself didn't know about this. But Wendy refutes back and turns to Art saying that he knew something about it. Art could only stare and not speak as Leah remained silent. Wendy then touches Art's shoulder and whispers to him that there was nothing to worry about and that all he needed to do was listen to her orders. Fear took over him once again as he realized that he couldn't make sense of his words. Wendy then tells him that her order now was for him to act as if he already knew. His vision blurs as he thinks about how if he went against Wendy it would cause trouble for Urk. He knew that he needed to endure this all by himself. Art looks at Urk's concerned face and took a moment before saying yes. With a dead look on his face, Art tells them that he was aware. Wendy smiles upon hearing that and tells them that they would be returning. Urk then calls out to Art asking if he remembers about the first day they met and how he helped her out with his cleaning magic, and that she made a request for him to confide in the Isfil family regarding his wishes. But Art's face was still looking dead as Wendy tells him to hurry up. Urk continues to speak to them about how he treated her father's insomnia by making a bed, and that even today he had supported her and calmed her anxiety. She grips her fist hard and shouts out loud as Art was behind her, "I want you to rely on me, Art." Life seemed began to appear on Art's face as he hears her words. Wendy shouts and orders him to not listen to Urk's words anymore. But Urk continues to speak about how Art was too kind to others, and that it was okay to not take on everything alone, as she wanted him to treat himself better. Hope starts to shine in Art's eyes. As he turns to look at Urk, who tells him to face her properly one more. "It's a request, Art," she says with tears on the ground. She looks at him and tells him to stop lying to her. As Art and Urk stare at one another, he couldn't help but feel like the worst. He thinks about how he had betrayed the trust of all those kind-hearted people. He grips his chest upon realizing that he had even betrayed Urk. As Wendy tries to pull him away, he tries to reach out to her thinking that he didn't mean to. Wendy yells at him that they were leaving and didn't need to stay with these people any longer. But Art could only think of how he was someone that could only take action upon receiving order, and that Urk had taught him about having his own free will. For someone like him who had no self-esteem, Urk had accepted him for who he was. Urk's faces were filled with tears as Art realized that all he did was disappoint her. He begins to tear up as he was torn away from Urk that he had failed as a butler. But even then, he just didn't want to lie to Urk. Art had now freed himself from Wendy's evil clutches. Pardon me for my rudeness, I actually did not know about the gold, Art said. Wendy was shocked to hear that. Leah was surprised while Urk was happy. Art then turns to Wendy telling her about how he was expelled from the house and that he was no longer her butler, but Wendy was confused and asked what he was talking about. With a firm, confident look in his eyes, Art begins to tell her. But Wendy orders him not to. Ignoring her words, Art bows his head and tells her that he was officially the Isfil family's Lady Urk's butler. Wendy felt doomed upon hearing those words from Art. Urk then tells her that if she tried to make Art do anything, she will have no choice but to intervene. Wendy knew that she must retaliate, as she recalls the memory of when Art called her a nice person. But her trembles as she tells them that they must be joking. She screams at them with tears in her eyes about why she has to when Art was always her. Leah then stops her and tells her that they were not yet done with the gold situation. She gives Wendy the bombastic side at telling her that it's about time for her to be punished for her impudence towards the kingdom. Right here, right now, in front of all the nobles present. Chaos ensues as everyone started to run. Some shouted that Baron Rubetto was escaping, and so was the Flamin' House too. The guards began to look for them as they couldn't have gone far. Wendy looks around in confusion before telling Art that she will remember this before running away as well. But she then trips on her own dress, causing her to yell out in pain as she falls to the ground. She notices that her dress was torn, but kept quiet, making her exit out of the ball as Leah looks at her running, saying, "Oh my." Urk then rushes to hug Art once Wendy was gone. Art was surprised by Urk's action, which causes him to blush heavily. She looks at him with a beautiful, radiant smile and tells him welcome back. Art could only stare and tell her that he was back. But Leah interrupts their special moment, saying that she was the one who did the most work, and that it was quite rude for Art to do that as there was no other woman like her. Urk then tells her that she was disturbing Art, but a guard then appears, informing Leah and Urk about something. Urk asks him what it was and he whispered it into her ear. Art notices that Urk's expression was grim, as she tells him that it was bad. That in Felon, towards their house were what seemed to be a large swarm of black batters approaching. A voice is speaking out as the city is set in flames. Insufficient, insufficient, insufficient. Hunger, thirst, no matter how many times I eat, I'm never satisfied. A swarm of bugs are seen flying in the air towards the burning city. No thanks, I'm out of here. Sorry for the delay, I had to bring back our voice artist. Back to the story. A man is seen with a coat hanging on his shoulders. He introduces himself as Peter, the guild master of the place. Art looks at him nervously, but Ramon assures him as he told him that Peter may not look much, but he could trust him. Peter then went straight into the details. He tells Art that it was around 20 years ago that the bugs started to get imported into the famine-struck kingdom. It was because of their black and hard shells that they don't die easily. On top of that, they also had a very large appetite, resulting in efficient reproduction. Art recalls from the royal capital books that it recounted that there was a swarm of between 100 million to a billion of them. Peter then informs him that the cities of Onyx Pearl and Garnet had already been decimated. Ramon added on that there was always a substantial amount of damage. But Peter tells them that this time it was much worse than the previous waves. As this time there was 500 billion of them. Hell no, I'm sorry guys, I'm out of here once again. It's okay, I brought him back guys, now back to the story. Urk was surprised to hear that there were 500 billion while Fry wondered why there were so many. Ramen then says they have started to appear with a serious look on his face, but Tet couldn't believe it as it shouldn't be the time for them to show up. It was the pure queen batter's manifestation. A glowing white bug lady was seen amongst the billions of black batters. Urk didn't know what that was, so Peter explains to her that the black ones are the common ones, and that the ones that are particularly light and huge are the pure ones. Tet then assumes that it meant they were ranked as the most dangerous ones, making it an S rank. Peter wanted to beat it first, but realized that it only takes one of it to raise an entire country to the ground. Ramon then asks how long until it arrives. Peter tells him in 1 week's time. Fry shouts out that it was too soon and that they wouldn't be able to make it after forming the extermination party, but Ramon tells him that it was not all. He points to the map of Drad, informing the others that if the bugs continue on their route, the royal capital Drad will ultimately end up getting attacked. Ramon's hinted that this was going to be the largest disaster ever since the country was founded, but Art puts up his hand, telling them that he had a suggestion. Peter tells him to hold on as this wasn't a safe place for a kid like him. But Urk reminds him that Art wasn't who he assumes him to be. Ramon then stops Peter as well and told the others to hear what Art has to say. Art then brings out a bottle with a cork. Peter recognizes it as lemon water. Art tells him that he brought some because of his sore throat, but later realizes that he could apply bug-repelling magic to it. Peter then tells him to not joke around, but one of the maids screams out that it was that thing. The head maid tells her to quiet down, but she tells her that the lemon water had made the bugs stop approaching even when she didn't use much of it. Art then tells them that if all goes well, it could buy them time for the next 2 days. Fry wonders if Art was serious, while Tet was surprised to learn that they could slow down the great disaster. Roman was impressed at the idea and that it came from the guy who made his bed. Fry and Urk praise Art for his idea because of his exceptional abilities and that he was already stronger than Art. Peter looks impressed by the idea, and he soon turns his head towards Art asking if he can do it, kiddo. Art was happy to hear those words. Ramon commented on how blunt Peter was, but Peter assures him that he couldn't help it as he didn't know any other way to ask for help. Art then calls out to Peter, bowing his head and telling him that he could leave it all to him. Ramon then informs them that he will send a message to the king so that they could gather troops, and that he will leave the rest of the work to Art. Art was happy to hear that Ramon considered him as part of the family. He recalls the happy memories of the Isfil family, and firms his resolution in ensuring that no matter what happens he would protect the Isfil family. Urk stares at Art and wonders how amazing it was for Art to stand up for anyone. Peter then tells them that he would collect everyone's information and would meet them at the guild in 2 days. Urk was then seen standing still in the shower as water continues to pour over her body. She thinks about how Art gives all of his powers for her sake. She thought deeply about how she had wanted him to rely on her, and that it was every she wanted. But she ended up always being the one that needed to be saved. She ponders these thoughts as the shower water continues to pour into the drain. A carriage wheel is seen speeding at a fast rate as a voice spoke out wondering if it was okay for them to sneak out without informing someone. It was Leah and her servant who were speeding away, as Leah thought about how she couldn't allow the Ice Princess to take Art away from her. Wait until I get to you, Art. She yelled out as many carriages are seen riding fast. Few black batters are seen on a grassy patch, as Art remarks about how they were able to find some nearby and that after all the research they couldn't believe that they were just in the garden, which would be of great help. Art greets them good morning and counts from 1 to 5. Urk notices that there were a lot of books on the table. She asks Art if he went through all of it, which Art replies that he did since they didn't have much time. With a concerned look on her face, Urk tells him not to overwork himself and that she could help if he needed it. Art then recalls the moment when Urk had told him not to light her back at the party. He thinks deeply about how he had decided to no longer worry Urk anymore. He then thanks Urk for her offer and took note of the fact that the black batters who loved the wheat he had poisoned with enchanting magic. He thinks about coming up with another plan if this doesn't work, but a voice calls out to him telling him to wait a second. Princess Leah had appeared at the door. Art was shocked to see her while Urk scolds her for not knocking on the door at least. Leah talks about what a wonderful greeting Urk gave her. She then smiles happily and informs Art that she came to help, bringing along servants who were carrying massive amounts of gold bars. A huge pyramid of gold bars was soon formed in front of Art and Urk, to which Leah tells him to accept it this time. But Art and Urk were stunned due to the golden light that shined brightly into their faces while Leah tells Art that the amount of gold bar were a little lesser than the amount she gave before, but the gold here amounts to about 5 million worth split between all of the gold and old grimoires. She then informs them that she had also brought the required materials in regards to the black batters. Urk then tells her that the gold was a bit too much, but Leah yells out at her saying it was not that much. She then approaches closely to Art and asks him about his reply. But Art was confused by what reply she wanted, which shocks her. Her drops down as she realized that Art had tricked her, but Art comforts her by saying that he didn't know what she was asking for. With tears and while biting a cloth, Leah tells him that she wanted to know his reply to her marriage proposal. Both Art and Urk were surprised to hear this and wondered when she proposed to him. Urk then yells at Art and asked if he was serious. Leah then explained that on a fateful day, he had saved her. Leah had felt the red string of fate pulling them together as if the heavens had willed it. Urt calls that crazy. In the background, the Black Batters were discussing marriage and called it crazy. Urt then tells Leah that Art was part of her house's name and she would like it if Leah stopped pushing him around. But Leah talks back, asking Urt about when had he become her possession. Art quietly and nervously asked if they could stop fighting as they both continued with an intense staring match. Leah looks at Art and asks him if she was not to his liking, but Art replies by saying that wasn't the reason. She then offers him a book about explosion magic which allows him to trigger surrounding explosions. Art yells out that he didn't need such an obnoxious spell. Leah pouts her face upon hearing Art's refusal. She then tells him that she would help in another way. Art asks her if she would be interested in anything, to which she replies of course. Art then points at the Black Batters and wonders if she could help him with them, but Leah was shocked to see them. Art sees her shaking and guesses that she won't be helping. But she agrees nonetheless, surprising Art as he asks if she was sure. She gives a weary look as she tells them that there was not a single thing she couldn't accomplish. But Art tells her that her thoughts were written all over her face as Leah recalls a traumatic memory of Black Batters. Art was happy to hear that Leah was helping and told her he needed to have a few things to do. Art then asks him where he was going exactly. Art tells her that he was going into the woods. Art yells at him that he couldn't go outside because of the Queen Batter causing the monsters to go savage, begging him to at least take her with him, but Art declines as he didn't want to get Art injured or leave Leah alone. He then tells her that he was alright and was merely going to get adventurers from the guild to help with the situation. Art was sad that Art refused her help. Art sees this and assures her that if she came with him, he would have to look after her and that it would be troubling if she got injured. Art then holds her hand, telling him that even as a noble, there were times when her belongings get cursed. She peeks at Art and looks down, knowing that she would always be the one that needed to be protected. She tells Art that she understood. Art was still concerned and calls out to Urk, but they notice that Leah was staring at the both of them. Art quickly changes the topic and asks Urk if she would kindly look after the Black Batters with Leah. Urk agrees straight away and told him to get on his merry way. Leah felt that she was experiencing deja vu. Art whispers into Urk's ear about rewarding her for looking after the Leah as he left. Urk tells him that she would look forward to it. They soon bid farewell to one another. The girls began to clean and study while watching over the Black Batters. They stare at the Black Batters and notice that they weren't doing much. Urk tells her that it was time to feed them. They watch as the Black Batters ate an apple to its core and noted that they would eat anything. But Urk was thinking about Art and where he had gone off, worrying about whether he would return. She thinks whether Art was okay about being under her house, or if it was just her selfish wishes. Leah interrupts her thoughts by saying she was like a lovely wife that was sending her brave husband off to battle, wondering why she had to wait with the Ice Princess. Urk asks her if she was okay with Art coming back and not liking her talk about him as her husband. Leah replies with a no, as Art had entrusted her with this duty and that it felt like God's will. Urk then asks about what had happened with the gold embezzlement incident. Leah tells her that they were planning on imposing an appropriate punishment on the wrongdoers, but this time the offending party would likely be in prison. Urk takes note of it. Leah then tells her that the punishment was usually death, but they decided not to take their lives so that Art would be pleased with the outcome. Urk wonders if this meant that they were escaping punishment, but Leah says that they were not an exception. Urk then asks if she was planning on telling Art about it. Leah wasn't sure and wondered what would happen if he knew about it. Urk thinks deeply as Leah stares at her. Leah soon gives off a smile, telling Urk that women needed to have tolerance. She points a finger at Urk, telling her that trying one's hardest to gather a lady's favor is a gentleman's job. Urk wondered if that was true. Leah tells her that it was the knowledge that was given to her by her father and mother. That is the way of women, Leah says, but soon realizes something. She blushes at the fact about why she was advising her rival. She thinks about the word tolerance and brushes it off as it would be fine if she was the only one who understands it. Leah then offers a gold bar to Urk, which causes her to wonder what she was planning to do now. A gold bar is given to the Black Batters as Leah explains to Urk that this was also a form of study and wonders about what would happen if they came across one of the largest discoveries of the century, but Urk still wonders what the plan was. A bright light soon shined from the Black Batters, causing the two of them to cover their eyes. Back at the Rubetto family estate, Wendy is seen alone sitting on her bed. Back at the Rubetto family estate, Wendy is still seen sitting on top of her bed with lamps and furniture tossed around in a mess. Tears flow from her eyes as she whispers Art's name. She thinks about how the talk of gold bars has been restricted, but she was honestly never that interested in the money. She grips the sheets of her bed tightly, wondering if only Art had stayed. She thinks about after the first time he had rejected her when she realized that Art no longer cared for her. She believed that it was only because of Art being here that she was able to trust the world. She recalls a memory from the past where Art told her not to look so down. But she tells him that the other kids were bullying her and wanted Art to punish them. But Art just took note of how Wendy must have felt very frustrated because he who had no blood ties to her felt that she was family, as Art would rather be a person that will care for her out of the kindness of his heart. But Wendy always knew that her actions were hurting those around her and that it always scares her. She knew she was always a coward to show off and full of self-confidence. She thinks of Art's face as she knew that she wasn't kind and had relied on Art's kindness instead, and how she had always thought of him as family, always thinking about how she could repay his kindness. But she treated him like a slave instead. Tears drop to the ground as she begged Art to forgive her as she apologizes to him. She cries heavily at the fact that she had liked him so much. Wendy continued to cry on her bed. But a voice yells out saying that Laptis Rubetto had committed an act of treason due to his crime of trading, smuggling, and contraband, hence he shall be arrested. Wendy peeks out of her room to see where the voice was yelling from. She sees her father being dragged away by the Imperial Guards. Sweat drops appear on her hand as she knew that Leah had something to do with this. A figure appears from behind her asking if she was Wendy Rubetto. The fierce-looking man explained to her that her father has been smuggling contraband between here and their neighboring country called Barbarossa. He was smuggling beastmen and elvish people and selling them as slaves. The Flamen family also seems to have ties to the trades. He then asks if she knew anything about it. Wendy figures out that the Flamen family was her pig-faced fiancé family and that they had been discovered to have been smuggling. She knew that her father had tried to marry her off quietly for connections. As a tear slides down her face, she tells the man that she knew. The man took note of it and tells her that they will be taking her with them. Wendy looks up once more, thinking that she should have at least apologized to Art first. Art was seen following behind a carriage and turns around as he felt something. A lady calls out to him, but Art tells her it was nothing as he looks at the mountains. Art was being accompanied by 3 members of the Sword of Blue Sky. He compliments them about how it seemed that everyone in the Sword of Blue Sky was very reliable. Huey compliments Art that he was good to notice that by just looking at them. Brad apologizes for Huey's rudeness while Thea tells him to get off his high horse. Thea then asked Art if he had finished gathering the intel. Art tells her that he did and thanks everyone for their hard work as they were able to scan the perimeter of the royal capital. Huey tells him that he was only helping as Peter had asked him to and that Art should be grateful to his humble self. But before he could finish his sentence, Huey slams into a tree. Brad tells Art that was what happens if you compliment Huey. Thea comments about how there had been a lot of monsters popping up recently as they had just met 20 in a row. Brad explains that it was due to the Queen Batter's influence causing the monsters to appear more rapidly. One of his acquaintances had to put a dent in a goblin's horde's population because there were so many of them. Huey says that they were only D rank as the group traveled through the forest. Art compliments the Queen Batter's ability to make monsters go savage was much higher than any ordinary ability. Huey tells him that no matter who or what comes their way, he would be able to defeat any of them, and then slams into another tree. Brad apologizes to Art once again for Huey. But he soon notices something and yells at Huey to get away from the tree and to watch out. A giant bear had appeared right above Huey. Huey turns around too late, as blood was splattered on everyone while Thea stares in fear. Art was carrying Huey in princess style as he cast his enchantment magic of wind to use quick steps, allowing him to easily cut off the giant bear's arms. Thea was surprised to see how he was able to get Huey to safety in a short moment, while Brad was sure that Art was beside him just a moment ago. Art then asks Huey if he was alright just as the giant bear lunges at them from the back. Art senses this and leaps into the air using a quick step. He says sorry to the bear before using quick drawing. But the giant bear manages to block his attack. Art was taken by surprise that the bear could match his speed. He brushes off the attack and thinks about how a giant bear's reaction speed was usually much slower. But he takes a heavy step causing the ground to crack. and appears right below the giant bear with his hand on his blade. The giant bear could only look at Art as he tells it that he got it. Art had managed to slice off its head in one strike using a quick draw battle of 0. The group was impressed with his skills, but Art was in deep thought about the sudden change in monster abilities and that the Queen Batter's effect was much stronger than expected, but soon a sound filled the air catching all of their attention, and the group wondered what the sound or song was. They looked up and could see the swarm of black batters covering the sky. Huey shouts out wondering what the hell it was, but Art knew that it was black batters. Art immediately takes off from the group telling them he was going to go ahead. He rushes at full speed knowing that if he doesn't report back quickly everyone would die. The arrival of the black batters wasn't in 1 week, but in 3 days. Back in the town, newspapers are seen flying around while the citizens read it. A man is shouting extra. Extra! Read all about it. Citizens in the city became aware that the city of Turquoise had been destroyed. The people wondered if the monarch was going to do something about it. Some had even said that a few of the nobles had already fled to somewhere far away. The citizens then began to think about leaving the city as soon as possible as well. Crows are then seen flying around a magnificent castle. Cyrilla the Chancellor was seen with a furious face as he grips the newspaper wondering what was the meaning behind it. Minister Nil reports to him about how the emergence of the Queen Locust had spread to the masses causing their distrust towards the monarchy. Cyrilla yells at him about the masses' distrust towards the monarchy, implying that the commoners should shut up. He leans close into Anil's face and tells him to retrieve all those newspapers right this instant and to apprehend everyone at the newspaper company and cut their limbs off one by one, but a voice shouts out saying that's enough. King Dread IV appeared with his incredible swag. He tells Cyrilla that a nation is nothing without its people and that it owes everything to its subjects. But the king coughs badly, causing the two of them to call out to him in concern. Anil tells him not to overexert himself as he was not in a condition to be moving around, while Cyrilla tried to tell him that they were setting a bad example. The two men then guided the king up the stairs. Overexert himself as he was not in a condition to be moving around, while Cyrilla tried to tell him that they were setting a bad example. The two men then guided the king up the stairs. Drad then tells them that they didn't have an effective countermeasure for a long time, making it understandable. He then asks Anil about the status of the subjugation troops. Anil reports to him that at present there were 3,000 royal knights that are able to be mobilized, but a third of them cannot be deployed as they would be focused on defending the palace. Drad then asks about the 3 royal commanders, to which Anil tells him that the royal knight commander Marcos was ready for deployment, but the remaining 2 were working on an assignment far away. Drad had a worried expression on his face after hearing the report. Drad then talks about since the founding of this nation more than 500 years ago, the Drad household had fought numerous demons and helped develop the country. As he sat on his throne, Drad didn't expect that a single monster could endanger their entire nation, but he grunts in pain before finishing his sentence, making Anil call out to him in concern. Drad breathes deeply and in pain, while telling them that he was making every effort for the sake of the nation's future. He then asks where Leah was. Anil then reports that Leah had sneaked past the surveillance and snuck out with gold ingots and a grimoire with her. Drad stares in the distance thinking about Leah. We are now brought back to the black batters, but one of them was shining as bright as the sun. Art was stunned AF from seeing the black batter glow so much. He comments that Locust one was glowing. Urk and Leah tried their best to avoid eye contact with Art as they explained to him that they had given it a gold ingot for fun and wanted to see what would happen if they gave more and more. Art then turns around to face them, causing Urk and Leah to cower in the corner of the room in fear. They started to apologize to Art repeatedly, but he hugs both of them tightly, saying that they were amazing with a happy expression on his face. Urk looks at him in surprise and wondered why he wasn't upset with them. Art then tells her that what they did was amazing and could be the greatest advancement in human history. Art then quickly runs to write down his notes in regard to the glowing black batter. Urk was happy that she was able to help Art with something, but she realizes that all the credit goes to Princess Leah and not her. She then recalls Leah's past advice about how gentlemen are attracted to motherly ladies. She then thinks of Art's smiley face and began to think that since he came back safe and sound she should show him her appreciation. She grips her hand with conviction, then calls out to Art telling him that she had just remembered something important. Just as she slaps him hard on the back and was about to tell him good job, a crying sound was heard in the room. Art then goes to Leah with a concerned look while Urk looked embarrassed from her failed attempt. As Leah covered her face with her hands, she tells Art about the fact that she was finally able to help him and that it made her so happy. Art tells her with concern that she was always helping him and that she should dry her tears first, but Leah tells him to pat her head first. Urk was annoyed in the background. Art agrees with her request, causing her to giggle a lot. She then gives the bombastic side eye to Urk, causing Urk to realize how stubborn Leah was. But a voice interrupts them saying, "Pardon my intrusion." Tet had arrived at their door, which surprises Art, but Urk was glad as she thought that he was going to take Leah away. But Tet tells them that it was not the time for it now. He informs them that the entire city of Firen was now being raided by monsters. Back in the city, monsters of various types were attacking the citizens and setting things on fire. The citizens tried their best to run away, but a little boy tripped and falls to the ground. His mother hugs him in order to protect him from the giant crow monster that was heading toward them. Its eyes were focused on them as its giant body casts a huge shadow over them. The little boy sees the monster with tears in his eyes. But bubbles suddenly appeared in the air. It explodes and catches the attention of the giant crow monster. The mother and child could only stare in silence at what was happening. Art had arrived and saved them. He thinks about how he had arrived before Urk and the others by casting quick steps. Just as he was thinking that the Queen Locust's influence making the place a mess, he prepares to cut down the giant crow. But Peter appears out of nowhere like John Cena and dropkicks the little birdie out of the sky. Art was surprised to see him here. Peter then turns to him wondering why Art was here just as the giant crow prepares to counterattack. Art warns Peter to watch out. But the giant bird was sliced into 2 in front of them. They cover their eyes from the dust due to the attack. Isn't this swell, said a voice as a metal armor foot appears from the dust. A Giga Chad man of impeccable looks arrives on the scene wielding a giant sword. It's the advent of Royal Knight Commander Marcos. The presence of the Royal Knight Commander was towering over before Art's eyes. He looks up to the commander and notes that he must be Frey's superior and was looking strong. Pettis appears and questions the commander if he shouldn't be busy cleaning up after the city's wreckage. The commander replies that he had been dealing with the A-rank monsters that were frequently spawning within the imperial capital's vicinity, just as a knight reports to the commander that they had successfully evacuated all the citizens. Art attempts to introduce himself to Marcos the commander, but his words were cut short as Marcos tells him to stay out of this. His eyes were glowing bright green. He tells Art that it was the Royal Knight's territory now. Just as numerous Royal Knights appear beside Art, Marcos the commander tells his troops to go and annihilate the monsters. He then stood still and began chanting a spell. Pettis sees this and immediately covers his face with his arms, yelling at Marcos about whether he was seriously going to unleash that power here. He then yells at Art to stand his ground. Marcos slams his gigantic sword into the ground, causing a huge shockwave to erupt with him in the center. The shockwave destroys everything that stood in its path, just like Pain in Naruto Shippuden. A huge explosion could be seen in the skies as monsters were flung back. The powerful shockwave soon comes to a stop, revealing 2 huge circles that surround Marcos as he stood in the center. Pettis yells at him saying that it was dangerous and that if Marcos wanted to kill all of them. Marcos apologies and states that since they were outnumbered, he had no choice but to weaken them a little with Quake. Hearing that Marcos used the Quake spell, Art thought about how the original Quake could only make your opponent's body quiver at most. The other Royal Knights could be seen fighting against the various monsters in the capital, until a gigantic bear monster lunges toward which catches the Royal Knight off guard. The other royal knights could be seen fighting against the various monsters in the capital, until a gigantic bear monster lunges toward which catches the royal knight off guard. A huge clash explosion is seen as the other royal knights watch. Smoke and dust were scattered everywhere until a gloved hand is seen in the smoke. Commander Marcos had rescued the young royal knight in time and had blocked the monster bear's attack with his arm. He grips onto the snout of the bear monster before slamming it directly into the ground, causing a massive impact that even cracked the ground. His eyes were filled with an unwavering wave of determination and fierceness as he stares ahead. He walks slowly to a group of monsters filled with various types such as crows and bears as his body radiates a bright aura. With a single massive swing of his sword, he slices all the monsters in one move. A monster bear soon appears behind Marcos, but he had noticed it already by then. A clash of strengths caused an explosion of smoke and dust to form once again from where they stood. Art could only stare in wonder and thought that there was no doubt about it that among the people that he had met so far, the Commander Marcos' strength was in an entirely different league. As the smoke and dust dissipates, Marcos could be seen standing triumph over the monster bear that wanted to sneak attack him. Pettis appears and strokes his chin, telling Art that thoroughly and overwhelmingly until there is nothing left. That man is completely focused on annihilating the enemy before him. The reason the Imperial capital has preserved its peace to this day is that ever since Marcos joined the Imperial Knights roughly 15 years ago, not a single invasion was made by other nations. Art listened to how Pettis spoke so highly about Marcos, knowing that was not all, as Commander Marcos had also bought time by acting as bait so that the evacuees and his troops would be unharmed. Art shows a disappointed look, thinking about the possibilities he could have if he only had half as much courage as Commander Marcos. He thought about the what-ifs as he recalls the incident back at the ballroom dance, and that if he had Commander Marcos' courage, then he wouldn't have had to make her cry back then. The group stood in the center of the circles that Commander Marcos had made with his quake spell as a bunch of monster crows slowly surrounds them. More monsters soon arrived in front of the group while baring their fangs at them. Commander Marcos waves his arm in front of his troops, telling them to step back as he would handle this himself. But the troops yell out at him, stating that he was bleeding due to the clashes with the monsters from before. But Commander Marcos brushes their concerns away while telling them that he was fine as he prepares his sword. Art then recalls Urk's words about how the Isfil household is an ally of the people and that she must protect his smile too. Art's eyes were soon filled with immense determination and courage. Streams of water soon start to flow from the manhole cover of the sewer below them. Art thinks about the fact that he was just a weak person that made Urk cry, but despite that, Urk had accepted him the way he was. Art was preparing to cast a powerful spell with water, as he had remembered the reason why he wanted to do the protecting too. He raises his arm high in the air, wanting to protect Urk's smile. He casts a spell combination of wash plus enchant spells, swell, oxidize, elasticity, lightweight, creating a spell called Misty Jail that had trapped all the monsters that surrounded the group into bubbles that float in the air. Enchant spells, swell, oxidize, elasticity, lightweight, creating a spell called Misty Jail that had trapped all the monsters that surrounded the group into bubbles that float in the air. The troops were shocked to see that magic was being cast multiple times by Art and realized that he was an adept user. Art then holds his finger and snaps them, saying let him rip. The bubbles filled with monsters soon disappeared in an instant, leaving sparkles in the air. But Art soon experiences a painful feeling throughout his entire body. He kneels on the ground in pain as the troops rushed over to his side. They tell him not to force himself, as using one enchant spell was already the limit for most people, and that under normal circumstances it would not be unusual for Art to be mentally broken down. Commander Marcos sees Art and takes a step forward. He then introduces himself to Art as the Commander Marcos of the Royal Knight. He praises Art for what he did just now and tells him that it was some impressive spellcasting. The troops behind Commander Marcos were shocked to hear him praise Art, as Commander Marcos was someone who had rarely called people by their names and never really praised anyone. The troops then asked Pettis who Art was, and he simply replied to them that he was a genius. Commander Marcos bends over to express his gratitude, causing him to be flustered as he tells Marcos that it was no problem, but then Art spots something that catches his attention. Marcos was giving him a serious expression. Seeing this made Art bend over as well to once again introduce himself as Art, who was under the care of Marquis Isfil. The two of them soon exchanged a brief look at one another. Tet interrupts them in a hurry as he calls out to Art. He tells him that they needed to head over to the nearby orphanage quickly, as Princess Urk was over there. The scene changes to the orphanage where black wolf monsters soon appear and Urk could be seen facing off against them, clad in her armor and wielding her mighty sword. Urk holds tightly onto her blade in order to wield her sword to protect those dear to her. The black wolf monster lunges at her, but she manages to block its attack. One by one the black wolves began to attack her, but each time they did, Urk was able to defend against their attacks as they slowly surround her. She curses in her mind about the fact that she could not mess up while protecting the nuns and the children. She then thinks of Art's smiling face, and prepares to fight with all her might as she knew that she shouldn't be lenient as Art was risking his life to fight in the city. Urk had always worked hard to become a pillar of strength for Art. She grips her sword tightly, wanting to protect them. Even if she was alone, she lets out a powerful downward swing of her sword that cuts down the black wolf that was closest to her. She then takes a heavy step into the ground and floats in midair to prepare another devastating sword attack at the two black wolves. Her attack lands with a powerful explosion seen from above, causing smoke and dust to scatter all around. Urk is seen in the smoke and dust holding her sword high up, but is panting heavily from the exhaustion of using so many moves. She then swings her sword backward as she senses something behind her. But it turns out to be a simple rock. When suddenly two black wolves appear from behind Urk's sides, she could not react in time as the black wolves' fangs slowly inched closer to her face. Blood was splattered in the air as Urk closed her eyes to hide from the potential attacks. But when she opened her eyes to see what was going on, she discovered two blades had hit both black wolves at once and caused electricity to flow throughout their bodies, stopping their attacks from ever reaching Urk and saving her life in the process. A shiny polished black shoe soon appeared in the smoke and dust as well. Art had finally arrived and managed to save Urk in time from the black wolves' attacks. They both showed a stunned and worried expressions on their faces. Art then says thank goodness you're all right to Urk. But her expression was darkened over the fact that she was once again saved by Art. The two had finally met after a long time, but Urk decides to apologize to Art for not being strong enough. Art tells her that it was not true, and what's more important was the fact that she was injured and needed first aid. Urk tells him quietly that her injury was nothing and that she was okay. Tet finally reaches them and calls out to Urk while being relieved to see that she was safe. Both Urk and Art soon rush back to the guild in the city as Tet informs them that there was an emergency meeting at the guild. They continued to run by the destroyed buildings and shops after the monsters had invaded. They soon reached the guild building, but Art notices that there were injured royal knights everywhere. A pair of royal knights push past Art, saying to excuse them and to let them through. Art could clearly see how injured the royal knights were as they were covered in bandages filled with blood. He overhears the bandaged royal knight apologizing to his vice captain, who tells him to not talk anymore. Art grips his hand hard, thinking deeply. He then hands over a bottle to the injured pair of royal knights, who asked Art about what it was. He tells them that it was a salve and that he thought it might help them. The royal knights then asked who Art was, but he assures them that he was just an ordinary butler and to excuse him and Urk as they were in a hurry themselves. Back in the guild auditorium, a bunch of the guild members had gathered in huge numbers in front of Pettis. Pettis starts off the meeting by thanking the guild members for their good work with the monsters out in the city, and then he wanted them to listen to Art, who was beside him. Art thanks Pettis for the brief introduction and introduces himself to the guild members. He tells the others that he had conducted his own investigation and that he had noticed that the Black Locust's invasion rate was faster than anticipated. Art then tells them that he expects it will take the Black Locusts 3 days to reach their city of Firen. The guild members soon started to panic and rushed over to Art upon hearing that the Black Locusts would arrive in 3 days. They commented that it was bullshit as the kingdom does not have enough soldiers and without a plan they would be like sitting ducks. Pettis hears the commotion and remains silent as the guild members shouted out their worries. He soon smashes the wall that was right behind both him and Art in pieces. The guild members were stunned by his actions as he looks at them in a serious manner. He reminded them that they had an urgent situation right now and needed them to shut up and listen to Art. Art was in awe of Pettis' Giga Chad aura as he stares in wonder at him. Art then went on to explain his reasoning. He stated that previously the Black Locusts were approaching fast, which was where his magic-infused lemon water comes into play. He needed them to spray a layer of it on the front lines to keep the insects at bay. After hearing the explanation from Art, the guild members wondered if it would work as they still couldn't subjugate the Black Locusts. Hearing the worries of the guild members allowed Art to reassure them that he had come up with a countermeasure. He reveals a Black Locust and a magic ore on the table and tells the guild members to observe. He explains to them that in an experiment, he had discovered that a Black Locust ingesting minerals brings about an effect on its shell. He then poses a question to the guild members asking them what they thought of when a Black Locust is given a magic ore filled with magic to eat. Art looks with a sad expression in his eyes as the Black Locust flips on its back with its legs moving rapidly but slowly comes to a stop. Urk was shocked to see this as Pettis adds on that the Black Locusts did not have the right organs to digest mana and thus are intolerant of it. In other words, magic ores were poison to them. Art confirms that what Pettis said was true and states that they could maximize their chances of avoiding battle as well as exterminate a large portion of Black Locusts by using magic ores. But the guild members remain silent as they hear the explanations, causing Art to panic as he thought about if it wasn't good enough for them. The guild members soon rushed over to Art and praised him for the amazing idea that he had come up with, even going so far as to state that it was possibly the greatest achievement in the history of their kingdom. But Art tells them that it was also thanks to Princess Leah and Lady Urk, as without them it would not have been possible for the idea to exist. Urk became flustered upon hearing that Art was praising her and could just blush heavily and shyly. Pettis then informs the guild members that the decisive battle against the Black Locusts would be in 3 days and that they should prepare well beforehand. The guild members rejoiced in unison upon hearing those orders. Art looks over to Urk and starts to think about her, recalling her face and knowing that she had given him enough strength by just being by his side. Art's face was once again filled with determination to protect all those that he hold dear to his heart. As the swarm of Black Locusts is seen swarming over to the city of Firen, Art swears that no matter what happens, he would definitely protect Urk. Bells rung throughout the city as Commander Marcos is seen leading his troops with their horses through the crowd. The people of the city presented flowers to the royal knights as they head out to the decisive battle. A huge number of royal knights were exiting the city as flowers were thrown at their feet. Commander Marcos led the charge and is seen with a fierce look on his face as they head to the final battle with the Black Locust. Urk and Art are seen stationed at the as flowers were thrown at their feet. Commander Marcos led the charge and is seen with a fierce look on his face as they head to the final battle with the Black Locust. Urk and Art are seen stationed at the old battle fort called Gestalt. She tells Art that the time has come and he agrees with her that it would all start tomorrow. Urk then apologizes to Art for having him dragged into the battle, but Art tells her that there was no need to apologize as he would do anything for her. A voice shouts out calling for Sister Urk. They turn to see that the voice had come from Firen orphans and they're none. Urk tells them to not come here as she had already told them to take refuge in the Isfil family estate, but the orphans had wanted to give something to Urk. They presented her with a wreath made of flowers which surprises Urk. She then hugs the little kids tightly and tells them that they should play again soon as she would definitely come back. Art smiles and watches from the back as Urk and the orphan kids hugged each other tightly. After some time Urk reminds them that the war council was about to begin and that the children should return to the estate. Urk and Art soon bid farewell to the orphan kids and the nun from the wall they stood at. Art commented that the kids were sweet. Urk agrees with him and states that it was a miracle that they laugh right now. Art was confused for a moment by her answer until Urk explained that the kids were disaster orphans, victims of abuse, abduction, and monster assaults. Urk was personally supporting their orphanage as it was experiencing some financial difficulties lately. Art gave a smile upon hearing Urk's explanation and recalled their first meeting at the guild as he tells Urk that he was glad that the orphan kids had met a savior like her. Urk looks at Art and tells him that she felt the same way just as a man appears behind her, telling her that the order of knights had arrived and that the war council regarding the decisive battle will now commence. They soon decide to go to the war council meeting together. A great number of royal knights are seen gathered in uniform stances. Petez and Art explained to the royal knights that there was a swarm made up of 500 billion black locusts and their queen heading towards the old battle fort Gestalt, which is where they were and which was also the last line of defense for their kingdom. They mentioned that there would be no Outlook squad, but instead we'll have 3 individual groups. The first group, called the rearguard sweepers, would be led by Ramon. The second group, called the ambush squad, would be led by Art. And finally, the last group, called the diversionary squad, would be led by Commander Marcos and Pettis. After informing the Royal Knights of the plan to engage in the battle with Black Locusts, the Royal Knights salute the commanders. Night arrives and ambers could be seen flickering in the sky. The Royal Knights were having a party with a huge campfire in the middle where they ate and drank as much as they could. Art and Urk were alone with their own campfire when he mentions to her that the Royal Knights were having fun. Urk tells him that Pettis was treating the Royal Knights as he said it might be their last day. Hearing those words made Art show off a sad expression on his face, but he changes the topic and talks about how Captain Fry seemed to be in a rush after they had talked with him. Urk tells him that Fry seems to be heading west with the rest of the cavalry unit. Art then mentions that Raymond and Tet were also participating in the war and that it was reassuring to have former high-ranking adventurers on their side. But Urk was upset over the fact that the Queen Locust had been designated as the most perilous S-rank hazard, which was incomparable to anything they had faced thus far. Silence soon fell upon them as they looked at the campfire in silence. A certain look came upon Art's face as he stood up. He immediately went over to Urk's side and grabbed her hand, causing her to be flustered as her face was blushing hard. He leads her towards the forest, telling Urk that he had a place that he wanted to show her. Crystal fireflies were seen, which were fireflies that were like crystals. The crystals they eat manifest on their shells. Urk and Art had wandered into a breeding ground filled with crystal fireflies that Urk mentions. Art looks back at her and wonders if Urk was going to be supporting them from the rear guard and that he was sorry they won't be fighting side by side. Urk had a silent look on her face as she asked Art if he was planning to defeat the Queen Locust single-handedly. Art was surprised to hear that from her, but he tells her that he was, which made her wonder if he was going to do it no matter what. Art tells her that it was okay and he was willing to do it for her, but Urk cuts his sentence off halfway by suddenly grabbing onto the back of his shirt. She tells him that she knew and tightens her grip while repeating the same words. Art continued to think deeply about her words and her action. He then turns to her with a smile on his face, asking her if she remembered the time when they were talking on the terrace. He tells her that it made him happy when she said that Art was fine the way he was, and that she was the only person to have ever accepted him for who he was, and that he had always wished that he could be by her side during her happy days. But this was the first time where Art genuinely felt that he really wanted to protect someone. Art pulls her closer to his body, embracing her tightly in his arms, as the crystal fireflies lit the area with their blue light. With his head on her shoulder, Art tells Urk that she was sorry for making her worried about him. He continues to tell her that he was a butler whose life purpose was to do his very best for the master that he would serve, and that even if it costs him his life, he would not hesitate to do anything for her. Hearing these words brought tears to Urk's eyes. Art tells her that he promises that he would come back to her side. Urk's voice calling out Art's name could be heard throughout the forest as the moon shined brightly. As they continued to embrace one another, Art thought about the feelings he had kept close to his heart, which had ignited a flame of hope in his chest. He fervently hopes that Urk may be blessed with overflowing happiness with his determination as a butler. The moon soon turned blood red as an endless swarm of black locusts was seen gathered in the red night. The Queen Locust was leading the charge toward the kingdom. The plan to subjugate the 500 billion swarms of black locusts was a success, as Her Highness Princess Leia was able to prepare magic ores and wheat flour in large quantities. Thanks to that, the subjugation of the black locusts was a huge success. Art and the rest only needed to finish off the remaining few now. Adventurers and royal knights could be seen slicing and dicing towards the black locusts that surround them. Pettis appears on the battlefield and shouts at everyone to give these pests hell. An adventurer could be seen lighting a fire in the midst of the battle, giving off a huge smoke. Urk tells Ramon that the smoke signal had started, which prompts him to state that the battle against the black locusts had begun. He thinks deeply and states that it is all up to you now, which refers to Art as he is seen hiding in the bushes watching the battle unfold. He sees the numbers of black locusts slowly disappear and realized that the troops had succeeded in diving their numbers and that all he needed to do was to attack the Queen Locust. Art thought about his plan and that even if he tried to break through with magic, he would still be stopped by the wall of black locusts, making sure that the ambush would fail. He thinks of everyone that had helped him so far and wished that those people were here supporting him, but Art brushes that thought away as he needed to do something about this by himself. He shouts out that he needed to do this myself. The Queen Locust finally reveals herself with a smile on her face. Pettis shouts out that it must be kidding as Art and Urk were shocked to see the Queen Locust, who was rank S, finally revealing herself. A ring of light soon appears around the Queen Locust, which Ramon spots and immediately shouts to everyone to get down as a bright light emerges from her body. The bright light came out in a massive wave, causing destruction all around to happen. A large explosion similar to an atomic bomb being set off was seen. The nearby forest mountains and castles were seen being easily blown away into pieces as the explosion reaches for them. Once the explosion had settled down, nothing was left as the Queen Locust stood alone in the midst of a barren land. The adventurers near Pettis shouted at him if he was okay while Pettis slowly stood up and called the Queen Locust a bastard. The Royal Knights asked the Commander Marcos if he was fine, to which he agrees. Ramon yells out if everyone was alright. Urk tells him that she was fine, but Tet was wounded when he protected her from the blast. A nearby servant yells out to the medics to tend to the wounded. Ramon and Urk looked back to where the explosion came from and remarked about its insane power. While Urk was concerned about Art, who was seen still in one piece amongst the smoke, he curses in his mind and hopes that everyone was okay. But something up high in the skies caught his attention as the smoke slowly dissipates. It was revealed to be multiple monsters of different types, ranging from dragons to minotaurs wielding a giant axe. The dragons roar fiercely in the skies as they head toward the troops. Meanwhile, the troops could only stare in horror due to the numerous powerful monsters that were coming toward them. They shouted "Mayday! Mayday!" due to the incoming monsters. Art could only think about the incident with the giant bear in the raid back then at Fire and wondered if they were nothing more than just Queen's test runs. Art immediately grabs onto his sword, determined to save everyone with his own hands. Back at the imperial family's castle, Princess Leia is seen sitting beside her father, the king, along with the ministers. The king asked her about how things were looking outside. She informs him that everything was fine and that she was sure of it. The king then asks her if she would not mind singing him a song, but she was confused by his request. He then tells her that it was pathetic for a ruler to be ill and bedridden at a crucial time for his kingdom and that he was worried for everyone's welfare, which was keeping him awake. Princess Leia then tells her father that he was still a child, which shocks the ministers. She then decides to sing him a song while telling him that he did not have anything to worry about, as the person who was destined to be her future spouse was out there on the battlefield. The world's strongest butler, Art, was then seen preparing for the upcoming battle with the Queen Locust as he takes a heavy step forward. Princess Leia continues to sing the song to her father, the king, as Art is seen dashing forward and cutting down numerous monsters, each with a single strike and a single step forward closer to the Queen Locust. He then unleashes a flurry of strikes that cuts a monster in pieces. His eyes began to glow a bright blue light as he was determined to protect those he hold dear. Art then decides to take a moment before closing his eyes to pray, hoping that his wish would come true, as Art needed nothing else but to just see Urk again. Ramon then calls out to Urk, telling her that there was a swarm of monsters and needed her to stay alert. Urk apologizes to Ramon and explained that she was lost in thought for a moment. A heavy thumping sound could be heard in the castle as numerous shadows of monsters appeared close to where Urk and Ramon were. The people in the castle stood up on the walls and shouted in dismay over the number of monsters that were coming toward them. But Urk appears amongst them, shouting at them to not panic and ordering her guild unit to get into formation while occupying every ballista. She orders the remaining troops to gather the debris and to load it onto the ballistae. Ramon and Tet watched Urk give out the orders with concern. The troops shouted out that the firing squad was ready, and soon the ballistae fired away at the incoming monsters to the castle. The debris landed heavily amongst the monsters. Tet commented to Urk that it was impressive that they had stopped the monsters in their tracks. Urk tells him that learning the art of war at an early age from her grandfather had proved to be advantageous. Ramon had an intense look on his face and tells Urk that it was expected of his granddaughter to have flawless commanding skills and was glad she had stayed with them in the fort. But Urk tells him that it was her wish to be here. Ramon then began to ask her if she was lying to him, which stuns Urk. She turns her head away from him, asking what he was talking about. But Ramon could read her like an open book and tells her to speak honestly without hiding anything. Urk had a sad look on her face. Ramon continues to tell her that she was a kind soul with a strong sense of justice, but that comes with a heavy burden of responsibility, even if she tried to bury her true feelings. He tells her to remember that just because she hides her own desires for the greater good, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. As the most important thing was to look within herself and never lie about her own feelings. Urk thought deeply about her grandfather's words. Ramon then tells her to leave the rest to Tet and him. Tet tells her to follow her heart. Urk took a moment to think deeply about their words. She thought of her wish to protect her beloved city and its people, and that to make that wish come true, she had given nothing but her all. However, she did not possess strength like veteran warriors, which was why she had chosen to be a part of the rear guards. She knew that this fight was the one that they needed to win in order order to protect fire and to protect the kingdom, Art was the core of this strategy, and she did not have the power to do it alone, but Urk still wanted to be a part of Art's strength. After all, she did not want to lie to those dear to her. She thought of all those close to her and knew that in order to protect them she needed to at least provide support. Her eyes began to flow with hope as she tells her grandfather to permit her to go to the front lines, as she wanted to protect the city with the person she cherishes the most. Ramon smiles upon hearing her determined answer, but a huge shadow suddenly casts over them as Ramon turns to see what it was. He immediately tells Urk to get as far away as she could, as he tells her that they had an unwelcome guest. The Queen Locust has once again revealed herself right in front of Ramon and Urk. Meanwhile, back at the battlefield, Art stood still as he stared at a black ball in the sky made of black locusts. His face was filled with panic as he realizes that the Queen Locust was heading straight to their stronghold. Weapons and monsters could be seen everywhere as smoke and dust covers the battlefield. Art appears once again and slices monster into various pieces. He sees from afar that the Queen Locust was near the stronghold and thought to himself that he needed to hurry or else, but he looked at the troops belonging to his squad and knew that he somehow needed to protect the divisionary squad too. He prays that Urk was safe. The Queen Locust lets out a light swing of its scythe-looking arm, unleashing a powerful wave that sends the soldiers near Ramon and Urk flying away. An announcement is shouted out saying emergency alert. Emergency alert. Prepare to intercept. As Urk looked frustrated at what was happening to the stronghold right in front of her, the soldiers were amazed at the strength of the Queen Locust but yell out to the others that they shouldn't move forward fearlessly. The nearby mages cast fire arrows and ice needles toward the Queen Locust, but she places her hands together to cast her own spell. It was revealed to be a protective bubble that surrounded her and stopped the mages' spells from landing. The mages soon realized what had happened based upon seeing that the Queen Locust's arms were in a praying position which somehow managed to nullify their magic. Their options to attack were now limited since their magic would not work and it was hard for them to get close to the Queen Locust. But a huge explosion is seen erupting directly behind the Queen Locust. Urk was surprised to see this and wonders if that was another spell. Ted informs her that perhaps the Order of Knights has been wiped out, but with a smile on his face, Ramon tells them that they might not need to worry as a metal foot clad in armor appears. Commander Marcos of the Royal Knights had finally appeared at the stronghold. He walks towards the Queen Locust while apologizing to the people in the stronghold for his tardiness as he had experienced a slight delay. Urk sees him approaching and calls it madness which was expected as one of the Royal Knight commanders. Commander Marcos soon faced in the stronghold for his tardiness as he had experienced a slight delay. Urk sees him Commander Marcos of the Royal Knights had finally appeared at the stronghold. He walks towards the Queen Locust while apologizing to the people in the stronghold for his tardiness as he had experienced a slight delay. Urk sees him approaching and calls it madness which was expected as one of the Royal Knight commanders. Commander Marcos soon faced off against the Queen Locust in an intense staring contest, stating out loud that the calamity that threatens their kingdom shall be vanquished. Commander Marcos soon unleashes a mighty swing of his heavy sword toward the Queen Locust just as she returns a powerful strike of her own toward Marcos. The collision of their attacks formed a massive explosive as debris and smoke covered the entire area, even causing Urk to cover her face while she was in the stronghold. Urk stares into the huge dust cloud to figure out what the shadow was. She wonders if Commander Marcos had succeeded in taking down the Queen Locust just as the shadow became clearer, but the harsh reality was set in as it was revealed to be the Queen Locust who had won in the clash of the Titans. She flashes a smile towards Urk as she continues to hold Commander Marcos with a spike impaled through his body. Seeing this sight created a rush of anger inside of Urk. The Queen Locust then throws Commander Marcos' body to the side, giving out an evil smile. Back at the battlefield, the sight of monsters and weapons clashing continued on. Art was cursing in his mind that there was no end to the monsters. His face was filled with fatigue as he thought about what would happen if he were to stray too far from the diversionary squad, making them in danger. But the sudden appearance of a monster caused Art to react too slowly to its attack. Another explosion of dust could be seen from where Art stood. Pettis appears with a jacked right arm blocking the monster's fist. He tells Art that he doesn't look too good. Another voice calls out to Art saying that it is too early to give up, which catches his attention as he turns around to see who it was. Fry had appeared on the cliffs with the cavalry unit of the Royal Knights. Art calls out to him while Fry tells him that they were sorry for being late. The Royal Knights spotted the situation on the battlefield and reported to Fry, which he informs them that it was predicted by Commander Marcos. Fry recalled the moment when Commander Marcos received the reports of the animals in the forest vanishing, and realized that it was perhaps there were still monsters lurking due to the Queen Locust's influence. He then orders that they needed to gather the Order of Knights from every location and return. Fry holds his sword close to his face after recalling Commander Marcos' orders. He orders his troops to take up arms as various weapons are shown in the air. He commands his troops that it was now time to pledge to their swords and to pierce the dark with its blade. Glory to Drad! Glory! They yelled as they marched down from the cliffs to the battlefield. Just like that scene from Lord of the Rings, a huge amount of cavalry knights were seen rushing towards the battlefield with Fry leading the charge. Monsters were easily cut down as the cavalry rode past them. Pettis smiles upon seeing this sight, and then tells Art to head over to where the Queen Locust was. But Art was hesitant to leave everyone alone on the battlefield. Just go, Pettis said. He looks at Art and asks him if he wanted to be where Urk was, and that he wasn't going to look after a kid like Art on the battlefield. Art was stunned to hear that from Pettis, but Fry appears yelling out if they had forgotten about him. He casts a primordial magic called Frozen Tear to freeze a monster that had appeared too close beside Art. Art was surprised to see Fry. Fry tells him to not get the wrong idea as he was doing this all for the sake of his precious little sister. Other adventures such as Huey, Thea, and Brad had finally arrived on the battlefield as well. Pettis then tells Art that he may have been thinking that he was fighting alone all this time, but instead should take a closer look, as he was not the only one. Art stood still on the battlefield where his comrades were helping him in defeating the monsters all around. His eyes began to water, but he wipes them off clean, which reveals his determined face as he tells them that he was going back to where his cherished person was, and that he promises to defeat the Queen Locust for sure. He tells everyone that they should all come home back alive, and that it would be a promise. All of Art's comrades agreed to his promise just as Art dashes through the battlefield to return back to Urk. Back at the stronghold, the only one still standing against the Queen Locust was Urk as everyone else was lying among the debris. With a determined look in her eyes, she yells out as she charges toward the Queen Locust. Each time she swung at her, the Queen Locust deflected Urk's attacks, making her realize that this was the power of an S-rank monster, which meant that a moment's hesitation could mean death and that it was a gamble where the outcome was uncertain. But it didn't matter to Urk as she continued to try her best to attack the Queen Locust as she had made up her mind to fight. Urk appears in the air above the Queen Locust preparing to strike her down, knowing that she wanted to protect the kingdom in which her cherished ones lived. But the Queen Locust had still managed to deflect her attack, but Urk was never going to surrender and continue to attack. But once again the Queen Locust blocks her attack, sending her back. Urk could only curse in her mind as she knew that she could not lose. Not here. Art's smiling face was reflected in her mind, but the evil smile of the Queen Locust was revealed as she finally unleashed an attack that Urk could not block. A sword appears and manages to stop the attack of the Queen Locust. Art had managed to carry Urk to safety with one arm while defending against the Queen Locust's attack with his other arm bent backward. Art looks at Urk and tells her that he was sorry that he was late, but Urk was confused about why he was here with her. He tells her that he needed to serve as her shield as it was also part of a butler's duty. Hearing those words brought tears to Urk's eyes. But just as they were enjoying their moment together, the Queen Locust attempts to cut them down, but Art manages to put its arm into two with a single swing of his blade. Art had now become serious. He tells Urk that they should now defeat the thing together as they both prepared to have the ultimate showdown. Subscribe, like, comment, and share to support the channel.